This is Family Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Nicole Penrod, and we're going to talk
Hello.
about how you doing.
I'm good. How are you?
It's fun to talk to people live on the podcast. This is what we like to do. We've been doing it since 2016, and we're about like 1,200 episodes. But it's just great to talk to different people around the world and get their point of view and their perspective. And that's kind of what we do with the podcast, to be able to do it in a live way, which gives us the ability to just have a real in the moment present kind of flow state conversation. That's the style that we like to go with. But
Mhm.
a couple questions before we get to the heart of your story. Like, what motivates you? Why do you do what you do?
Yes. Yeah. So, for context, I am a therapist in California, and that is so near and dear to my heart. And particularly being in California, being from Southern California, a lot of the folks that I work with are very creative people. Some of them are creative just in terms of it's a hobby or they love art, they love writing, they love reading, whatever it is. And for other folks, it's their livelihood. So I've worked with producers, writers, influencers, and content creators, musicians, bloggers, lots of folks across the industry in different positions. And one thing that I see come up so often is that creativity is this immense source of joy and fun and connectedness. And it can also become a source of so much angst for people when we're talking
Hmm.
about burnout or creative blocks. So, one of my greatest passions in my work is helping people to understand why our brains do what they do and use that to actually unlock further creativity and sustainability in a creative process. We don't really learn that in school. So, getting to step forward and say, wow, how do I take this thing that I love, make it a career, make it feel real? I'm sure you'll have a lot to say about this too, considering how long this podcast has been running. But yeah, how do you keep your head up and keep doing the thing that you love?
Yeah, I think it's part of it is like my grandfather was a coal miner, and my dad was like a sales guy. So
Mm, mhm.
as a coal miner, he had to get up every day and go into the mine, and it's a hard thing to do. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people probably wouldn't do it. But he
Yeah.
did it because it's like, he felt the value of doing the work.
Mhm.
So I've always kind of like, if you show up, that's half the thing. My father being a sales guy is like, showing up is the only way you're going to get the lead.
Right.
And so I kind of translated the kind of working person, blue collar kind of concept is like, as a creative, you have to think the same way. Like if
Mhm.
you're a creative, you gotta show up and you gotta like it. You gotta love it. Like if you just do it and you don't love it, like a lot of what I do is like as a piano player or musician, like synth player, I've been playing since I was like 12 years old. And
Mm.
like if I was just playing trying to be like the biggest star in the world, I probably would have gave up. I play because I love playing piano. I love
Mhm.
playing the instrument. So like if you don't have a passion for the thing you're doing, it's probably hardest to sustain it. Like
Yeah,
so you have to
absolutely.
think about like what you're doing. Do you love it? If you love it, you'll be happy doing it whether it makes money or not.
Mhm. Yes, and I love that you're adding in that piece of you have to love it, and that just by itself is not enough. You have to be willing to keep showing up for yourself over and over.
Yeah, you have to put the time in, to get to be like the 10,000 hour, 20,000 hour,
Right.
to get to be like good at your craft. If you're a poet, you're a writer, you're an actor, the first thing you do as an actor is not going to be what you do after you've done 10,000 hours of being an actor.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
that's how you get to the craft. And people might think you can just quick, quick, just do a shortcut and just like, AI it to the
Mhm.
people do today. Like I can just use a shortcut to get to it. Like, my daughter's a graphic artist and
Ah,
she was
yeah.
like, she's a, line artist, does like a lot of like what you call sequential graphic art. And she was dealing with this like new like AI artist, this AI art person that's really not an artist, more of a technician.
Mhm.
And she was trying to show them the difference between actually crafting like a painting of people. The AI artist had taken the same face and put it on multiple types of people, elderly
Ah,
people,
yeah.
woman. It's the same facial structure. My daughter, as a graphic artist, said, I noticed you're using the same facial structure for multiple types of people.
Mhm.
And AI artists didn't really understand the craft of like maybe you should give every person like their own individual face and have an emotional impact
Right.
because they're shortcutting it.
Yeah.
They didn't put the work in to be a real graphic artist. So they're mimicking a graphic artist without knowing what it really means to actually have like a emotional connection to what they're doing.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, well, and the way an artist becomes more efficient is by becoming more skilled, not by just being faster or shortcutting or doing the same thing over and over, but actually by perfecting or at least mastering their craft.
Yeah, and the danger with the tech today is, even a programmer could shortcut their coding capability by using AI, but somebody from the 70s that had to do it on a mainframe and actually write 10,000 lines of code
Yeah.
learned what it means to write those 10,000 lines of code.
Mhm. Yeah, and if the code breaks and you have to go back in and fix it, do you even understand
You
how it
understand what you're
functions?
doing if you're just cutting and pasting what AI is giving. Do you actually have an understanding to solve the problem if it errors out? Yeah, I've
Mhm.
like worked with some of the people who've been doing it for 25, 30 years. They can figure out what went wrong.
Yeah.
Somebody who's just cutting and pasting, they don't even know what they did.
Right.
So,
Right, and it becomes like starting over and it's just not as
yeah.
efficient in the end, yeah.
So I think like in terms of burnout, like I think you have to understand like what is sustainable. Like
Mhm.
what is sustainable for me might not be sustainable for somebody else. So if you get in a comparison trap and
Right.
somebody wants to do what I've done on podcasting, but then they like after 10 episodes they stop because like that's their tolerance
Mhm.
for the craft
Yeah.
versus somebody who's willing to do 1,000.
Right, yeah, I read somewhere the average podcast publishes 7 episodes ever.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the ones that go
that's
for a long time are total outliers.
yeah, because it's like you have to show up. There's a benefit to showing up. Like you show up, you get a higher score on listen notes.
Mm.
You show up, you get advantage. I've got some market deals with like companies that actually sponsor the show.
Mhm.
Um, because you show up like when at the beginning when I heard the first 10 or 100 episodes,
Yeah,
no sponsor, no help.
right.
But as you start, if you create a pattern where you're reliable, I mean, I'm doing 5, 6 interviews a week. I'm
Mhm.
getting guests all the time because people know I show up.
Right.
So you start to create a pattern that people can rely on the fact that you're there. And when people start to rely that you're there, then people like I get a Rolodex and one author says, "Hey, I was on the show." Another author says, "Hey, you want to be on the show?" A musician says, "I was on the show," and they give a reference to somebody else. So you get word of mouth.
Mhm.
You get connection, like people connection.
Yeah.
So I think there's some work that people in this digital age forget about, like the Rolodex or the face to face or meeting somebody, and there's work that you have to do. And I think if people don't do the work, then they get maybe more frustrated and burned out with
Mhm.
results that are instantaneous.
Absolutely. Well, I love that you bring up demonstrating that something can work and demonstrating it to other people repeatedly, that you're reliable, that you can show up. Because if we think about the psychology of burnout and sustainability, it's actually about demonstrating to yourself, to your own brain and body, that you are reliable, that you are trustworthy, that you are capable of handling what comes at you. If you don't trust yourself, you're going to burn out a lot faster because your body is going to start conserving resources and say, hey, hold on, are you actually going to ever rest? Or are you going to deal with whatever emotional thing came up when you were working on that creative project that was really personal? Are you going to process that ever? And if you keep pushing through without tending to yourself and demonstrating that reliability, that safety, then you are sending yourself straight to burnout city. And that is a really nasty place to be.
Yeah, I think that also like it goes toward like, do you need to like if you're a gigging musician, like you have to trust yourself on how much time you need to rehearse.
Yes.
Right. So if you're gigging, you're going from town to town, you pretty much got it down. You don't need to rehearse if you've got multiple shows. So you're not rehearsing for 4 hours before you do the show. You're giving yourself time to rest from the last show.
Hmm.
You know, if you get some people to kind of get in this manic thing where, even though they're on stage and they look super confident, why are they practicing for 3 hours
Mhm.
when they already know it, right? And then you're
Right.
actually doing damage because you're not. It's not necessary. So then it's more likely you're gonna suddenly say, "Well, I can't do this show," because you burned yourself out.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're turning on your stress response when you don't need to be. If you have the experience, if you have the skill, and you're putting yourself through an excessive amount of rehearsal or double checking, or with a lot of writers, there's like this over editing of like, it's not done, it's not done, it's not done. And what you're
Mhm.
doing to your body is you're setting off the stress response. You're throwing all of those stress hormones into your system. You're repeating and repeating the anxious thoughts. All of that makes your body think that you're being chased by something, like there's a
Yeah,
panther in the room with you.
yeah,
That's
you have a
exhausting.
virtual wolf at the door. I've always kinda talked
Mhm.
about this virtual wolf at the door
Yes.
that's, like, stressing you out because 'cause you're thinking about all the things that could go wrong when you've already like, if you're thinking about it like you're a public speaker, you're doing, like, a TEDx talk,
Mhm.
and, like, if you always do the same talk, like, okay, I'm good at this, but you also have to be able to read the room. You have to be able to riff a little bit and kind of know what you know,
Mhm.
and then know that if I could go and kind of freewheel it, and it's not going to be authentic, or it's not like that I didn't do a good job. I just know this topic, and if somebody asks me different questions, I can handle it. So it's like a jazz musician. Like there's no bad note. There's an opportunity. So if somebody
Mhm.
plays a note I didn't expect, I can kinda ramp to that because I kinda know I've done my work. I know what notes would go with that note. If I see a diminished seventh,
Yeah.
chord, I can go and know which chord would go with that if I hear it, and it wasn't in
Yes.
the plan, I can still ramp to it, and we don't have to start from the top again.
Right. Well, I was literally just saying this yesterday in a session that preparation and rehearsal are different. Preparation is the skill building, it's creating the talk in the first place, it's practicing whatever if you need to do some anxiety reduction or grounding before you get out there to get present, if you need to, tap back into your sources of inspiration and feel really like, "Yes, I'm here, I'm in it, I feel the energy," that's preparation. Rehearsal is when we think we can imagine every single thing that could possibly go wrong.
Yeah,
In our mind at least, right? It's like scripting almost. Okay, if I
yeah,
just do
yep,
this perfectly, and then we lose that ability to improvise. And of course, that's going to feel bad. And then instead of learning the lesson that we need to be present and relax, we actually get even more tense because it's like, oh
yeah,
no, now
you
something could go
over
wrong next
rehearse
time.
again. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's the thing why, like, I've seen in podcasting, there's kind of school of thought of having the episode with the least amount of ums in it, and being tightly curated
Mm,
and kinda created to create kinda clickbait reels, and everything's kinda has to be perfect set of questions, perfect set of responses, has to be this idea of perfection because in the digital age, we could get to that. We could use
mhm,
AI to do cuts, all these camera angle playing with tricks visually that might feel appealing, but is it actually what you want? Would you
mhm.
rather have a heart to heart conversation with somebody that goes into some depths and somebody said a couple of times? Did you really need to go and edit those out?
Yeah. Yeah, what are we optimizing for? I mean, for some people, the answer is just money, and that's fine. Or like social reach or whatever it is. But if you are trying to make a genuine connection with people and really trying to display something of your own truth and share it authentically, you can't optimize that. You can't practice it enough. You can't do the right amount of cuts or make it so clean. It has to just be human.
Yeah, it's like this idea, like there's an infomercial, or there is like in the moment flow state conversation that has some vulnerability and some things that are like maybe you didn't expect.
Hmm.
And maybe, but that's good because the way we went into an area that somebody needed to hear that, and it wasn't
Yeah.
in the plan, but it actually is gonna resonate with someone. Like,
Hmm.
so that's the case. It's like, this because it didn't resonate with 1,000,000 people, maybe it resonated with the right person
Yeah.
that needed to hear that at that moment.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me so in therapy, we have treatment plans. I work with someone, oftentimes there's a diagnosis, and we make a plan of, okay, here's how you're going to feel better. That's super useful. And some of the deepest and most valuable sessions that I've ever had with clients are the ones where they show up and they go, I don't really have anything to talk about today. And oh, I don't really want to do that thing that was on the treatment plan. I don't want to do this one strategy. Like, can we just talk about something else? And we explore. And that's when people get really real because
Yeah.
there's no agenda.
Yeah, I think the idea is like some people, they hold back things if they think that they have to be perfect because
Mhm.
they're like scared to say anything because they don't know, well, that's not going to sound right, or that's going to shame me, or
Yeah.
I don't really want to be vulnerable. But if you can set somebody at ease so they're like talking to like their best friend, then
Mhm.
the guard's going to drop and you can actually get them to actually be real
Right.
and actually tell you something. If you're an interviewer, tell you something that maybe they didn't plan on going into there, and then they go there, and it's like you're not trying to trick them, but you're trying to pull out something that's going to actually be, you know, the thing that I want to hear, or I think the audience wants to hear is like that's the nugget that you want to get to.
Mm,
You can. It's not like you're trying to trick anybody, but you're just trying to get people to be themselves, as much as they can let their armor down.
right. Yeah. And the other piece about that too, I think the arts are so competitive, and I think people can get really, really in their heads about what it means to create a career in the arts when it feels like there's only so many opportunities, and it's getting even slimmer with this invention of AI and the optimization and the efficiency. And that puts people into this total fight or flight mentality of, I can't take risks, I can't be real, I have to do things perfectly. And I have to do them in the way that's going to resonate with this imagined target audience in the right way, get the right amount of views, or land the role. And when we're thinking that way, there isn't space for what makes me me and what makes people actually want to connect with me, to work with me, to be me sometimes if people are very public facing and want that audience. It's so
And there
difficult when we're in this like, "Oh god, there's not enough room for me" mentality.
and the thing is there's not enough room if you're trying to clone what's out there.
Right.
Because what they've done is like this is the category, this is the genre, this is the thing, right? But
Mhm.
if you look at the great innovators, they didn't really care about that. You think about Dylan, Hendrix, Janis Joplin. People they pushed things, they did things that people told them they shouldn't do. Right? The great innovators, the Coltrane, all the great innovators in music and art did things they say, well, you shouldn't play discordantly like that. You
Mhm.
shouldn't you use feedback, Hendrix. That's not something that goes on record, right? Dylan, like you can't go electric if you're a folk singer.
Mhm.
You can't sing with that voice. It's got to be more like a Sinatra or be Nat King Cole. How can you sing with that voice? Because you're a writer and you're telling stories, and it's a different type of frame. He kind of opened it up that you could have any kind of voice. You could actually be spoken word like a Lou Reed. That you opened it up
Mhm.
that you didn't have to have perfect pitch. So so you opened up that you have female songwriters like Carole King and Karen Carpenter, people going into emotional singing, not perfect singing, but telling stories from emotional kind of vulnerabilities. And it opened it up like what you could do, and it didn't have to be the perfect thing that was in the 50s or the 40s of the perfect pitch singer that had certain octave range of voice, and that's the only person that can gatekeep through that. You know, I think people need to understand like the innovation is what is needed, and what's needed is not always what's out there right now.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to create your own blueprint for what success actually looks like and what that means. If you try to do it somebody else's way, they're already there.
Yeah,
Are
there's
you gonna do
already
that better than them? Or are you gonna do somebody else's thing better than they do it? They made it up.
yeah, there's already a Taylor Swift. There's already
Right.
a Beyonce. You could try to get in that market and be the same person, but wouldn't it be better to be like the new Taylor Swift with a new point of view coming from
Yeah.
a different direction? Like you had the Beatles, you had the Monkeys, right? The Monkeys were kind
Mhm.
of a clone of the Beatles, like a cartoon clone of the Beatles.
Mm.
Eventually, they became actually their own thing, and they actually did wrote stuff that was actually really interesting. But
Mhm.
when they were initially, they were like a clone, and
Yeah.
so Like everybody wants to just clone things, and you see a million clones. Once something's like successful, you get like hundreds of clones.
Yeah.
And everybody tells you in the industry that that's what we should. Even with movies today, we see people just playing it safe and just like remake something that was done 10
Right.
years ago. If remake something that was done 5 years ago. It's like, why did you need to make it? We've seen that 5 years ago and you're gonna make it again. It's like we already saw it. It's like, but you could because it's a sure thing. Really? People
Yeah.
get burned
Right,
out
why
if
are we
someone
doing
says,
this?
why is that the sure thing?
Yeah, totally. Right. Well, and I think too, when we're thinking about what's sustainable, if you're not doing the thing that is truly you and that you actually want to be putting your time, energy, effort into, it's not easy to be a creative full time. So if you're going to put that much energy into something, you have to love it and it also has to be real. It
Yeah.
can't be for somebody else's bottom line where you're like losing your own voice. Again, that's how you burn out and you lose yourself.
Yeah, 'cause I think a lot of people are looking to just be in this market niche and they want to be the widget of the week.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you could be in a widget of the week, but you're probably gonna be a one-hit wonder, right? And then that's not sustainable. You're gonna be a one-hit wonder. And like if you want to play that song the rest of your life, and that's the only song anybody ever hears you sing, is that really what you wanted to do?
Yeah.
Or you're like a lot of independent musicians today aren't shooting to be in the top 10. They're just
Mm.
shooting to maybe, you know, be in a niche and maybe sell 50 to 100,000 records, but they own their master. They own their
Mm.
work. They can tour and they can tour at such a low level of listening that in streaming they can't make money.
Yeah.
But if they actually sold 10,000 vinyls and they own that record, they can make, $10 off the $30 charge. They actually
Mm.
make more money than they do streaming. And
Yeah.
there are artists that live on this kind of micro level because they didn't try to oversell and they're not
Mhm.
over living. They're not trying to have a limousine. They're not trying to have the mansion. They just love doing the work they're doing. And they can live in an indie scene that doesn't have to have millions of listens to actually be in the game. It's a
Mhm.
different expectation. It's like, what were you chasing? Are you chasing to be in Rolling Stone? Or are you chasing to actually be able to keep on playing and writing for the
Yeah.
next 10 years?
Right. Right, and that's the comparison piece too. It's not just looking at somebody else's art, it's also looking at somebody else's success and thinking you have to want the same thing, and you have to carve the same path, and then you'll know that you made it. What do you actually want? What do you actually need? These are huge questions that come up in therapy, certainly, and all of us, I think, could do well to reflect on that a little more often. What would it mean if I got what I wanted? Where would I actually
Yeah,
be? How would that feel?
yeah, because if you were the person that sold the million,
Mhm.
is it gonna make you feel, like, totally, like, unhappy?
Mhm.
There's many stories of, like, people who made it and then were severely unhappy,
Yeah.
and so, like, it's like to the wider world, you might have thought they made it, but they hated it. They didn't actually love what they actually got to a point where they hated what they were doing. It was kinda just it was actually giving a job to the roadies. The record company wanted them to do it. Other people wanted to do it, like, the business wanted them to do it, but they didn't wanna do it. If
Mm.
you really wanna
Yeah.
be in the place where, like, you're just feeding the machine, but you're not feeding you, you don't really aren't even interested in it anymore.
Right. Right, and also does the goalpost move? Do you think that you'll be so happy when you hit a certain thing and then you decide actually you wanna double it, and then you wanna double it again? Does that ever stop? I think for a
Yeah,
lot of
well,
people, there's this expectation you have to just keep going as far as you possibly can.
that's like the thing with, like, you want $1,000,000, but why do you want the $1,000,000? What is
Mhm.
it the $1,000,000 is gonna do? And then when
Mhm.
you hit the 2,000,000, they're still not happy because it didn't really solve like, you're very deeply unhappy because you thought being a musician was gonna give you, like, relationships that were meaningful, but now you still have no meaningful relationships. Your
Mhm.
parents, you think they're gonna respect you, they still don't respect you
Right.
because they didn't like your path. So even if you make $2,000,000, they still don't respect you, so that doesn't solve it. So you're like, "What
Mhm.
is it you're trying to do?"
Right. Yeah, and sometimes money also makes that worse. I've worked with folks who became successful to a degree and then became very paranoid that everybody in their life around them was near them, was in relationship with them because they are successful and
Yeah,
not
so
on
who's
a
real?
deep
Like,
emotional connection level.
yeah, do they really like who they are, or do
Mhm.
they like their stage self?
Yeah.
They like their stage persona, but that's not who they really are. That's who they are for 2 hours, or that's who they were in the video. And people sometimes don't understand. Like, we see Mick Jagger doing the
Mm,
strut, and
mhm,
then there's Mick Jagger, the English businessman, who could talk to you about, like you would sit him in the House of Lords or something. It's like, oh, I didn't know he doesn't seem like a rock and roller there.
mhm.
Well, it's like when he's on stage, that's who he is. But
Yeah.
he's his business self. He's pretty shrewd. He's kind of together. He kind of knows what he's doing.
Mm,
He's not who you
yeah.
think he is. He's not like this, this out. This I'm just having a party. Like, no, he's not all about the party. He's kind of about the money.
Right. Yeah, what version of me am I selling? And then what am I doing about the perception that people then have? I think some people are a lot better with the boundary piece too than others of like, do I portray my real self sometimes? Do I have a line between me, the performer, me, the persona, versus me, the authentic self? And who do I actually allow into my bubble? It's a little bit
Yeah,
sticky,
it
particularly
gets
with social
sticky.
media.
Yeah, because remember, like, the grunge movement was that people were like, I don't want to be this, like, you know, Jagger kind of, Led
Mm,
Zeppelin kind of rock star. I want to be a rock star that understands about political things,
right.
social things. I don't want to be going around thinking like I'm smashing hotel rooms and I'm driving my Rolls Royce into the pool. I actually care about the environment. I
Mhm.
care about this. That I'm not going to wear a costume. I'm just wearing jeans. I'm just going to be just
Yeah.
like you. I could be anybody that's in the crowd, like Eddie Vedder, or Kurt
Mhm.
Cobain. They were kind of carrying this thing, and that could have been an act too. You don't know,
Mhm. Yeah, we don't know.
but it was just this idea that they were more real, kind of like a punk aesthetic. There's like, I'm not this high level performer that you could never be. You
Mhm.
could be up there with like Joey Ramone's, like you could do that. You
Yeah.
you could maybe be a punk. You could actually get up there and like if you have heart, you could be
Yeah.
Joe Strummer. If you care about what you're doing, you don't have to have pitch. You just can care that I'm gonna show up, be on the mic and care about it and just be a punk aesthetic. Get into the punk
Mm.
aesthetic and just feel it. Feel the raw of this emotion. It's like, hey, I wanna say something.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it makes me think too about there's a lot of musicians who feel a lot of pressure these days, right? They're up and coming to blow up on social media. I have to post the video that gets people to be interested. And sometimes what happens is there's this additional pressure. Okay, I'm posting the music, it's not really catching on. Can I find something else to get people interested? And you start kind of cannibalizing your own life for content.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
maybe people wanna see my morning routine. Okay, maybe people wanna see the behind the scenes bloopers. And then there's a point at which you've given everything away,
Yeah,
and
there's no,
maybe you're
like
still not where you wanna
why
be.
would you wanna go see him in concert if you're always doing a TikTok?
Right.
Like, I heard some actors say one time, I think there's a famous actor said, I think it was like, I don't know if it was Denzel Washington, but it's like, you should shut your TikTok down if you want people to come to the movie. Because if you keep on
Mm,
showing them everything that you in your life, they're not gonna come to the movie.
mhm.
So you kinda gotta keep things like, don't show so much or they're not gonna get interested.
Sure, yeah, there's discussion now about have we lost this, like, idea of the mysterious creative figure because
Yeah,
everyone is so
too
much,
much.
like, access to each other and each other's lives through social media now.
Yeah, do you have to be doom scrolling? You gotta be posting every 15 minutes to be
Yeah,
relevant? Or could you
yeah.
have some mystery like a Prince, nobody knew what the heck was going on
Mhm.
with him. He
Yeah.
was very mysterious. Very, other than that he liked to work a lot to his own detriment, but
Mm,
he didn't really let fans know who he was on
yeah.
purpose. He
Mhm.
kept a mystery about it, kept it kind of like he's this like purple genius. You have no idea where it's coming from, right? That was the idea to do that on purpose,
Yeah,
you know?
right. Yeah, that's such an interesting line between authenticity and protecting yourself. You wanna be so real, and you don't wanna give everything away for the sake of your career, because people are gonna get bored eventually, or they're gonna want more from you than you're willing to give, and also just for your own sake, so that you feel like you ever have a chance to turn it off.
Yeah, that your like, your personal life doesn't have to be in the tabloid. Like, you could choose, like, I am not gonna talk about my personal life at all. I'm only gonna talk about this. And people today wanna be able to say, "Well, you should be if you're out there in the public space, you should be willing to show me everything. What you have for breakfast,
Uh-huh.
you're in the bathroom, taking a shower, I should see everything. Nothing's a secret."
Right.
And, I think that's a danger if you don't give yourself a place that's your own, right?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just on the mental health level, how do you ever recharge if you're never truly resting? Because if your rest becomes fodder for your work, do you get to recharge? Do you get to turn it off? Do you get to refill that creative well? I mean, as creatives, we also have to engage with art that's not ours, so that you can take stuff in, have inspiration, find new ways that things are gonna interact with each other. You can't just go, 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 and never
Yeah,
stop.
yeah, you have to have the downtime. You have to like times the musicians, like, you have to walk away from, like, the recording studio. You gotta like, you could be in there and have diminishing returns, stay in there all night, stay in there 2 days in a row. Or you could walk away and take a break. Sometimes you could, like, take a break, and I'm not gonna do anything. I'm just gonna have like, not touch my instrument for 6 months.
Mhm.
And that's the kinda like the old school 1970s musicians, they would go and walk away from it and decompress and
Mm.
detox,
Yeah.
get out of it. Now we got people say, "Well, I gotta produce something every week.
Yeah.
I actually gotta be putting out a single, like, every month." So they're not giving themselves that time to decompress. The rock star would, like, just disappear for 2 years and then show up 2 years. Led Zeppelin was, like, 2 years later come out, you know?
Yeah.
Like, well, like, you kinda there's some stars that do like, Sade is famous for saying, like, she just walked away
Mhm.
for, like, 7 years and lives
Mm,
her life,
mhm.
and then nobody knows what the heck's going on. She's
Right.
very private. You have no idea, and then when she wants to come out, she comes out, and there'll be a big blast of media. She'll do interviews, she'll do tours, and then when she's done, boom, she's back to her own world, and she doesn't wanna tell anybody what she's doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of in the publishing world, Donna Tartt, who writes a massive bestseller, slam dunk, complex literary book every 10 years and then just kind of disappears again. It's her process, and it's really, really different from what we see in, for example, like self-publishing with the romance industry, which is you have to publish like multiple books a year to stay relevant in the algorithm when people are just like scrolling and searching for their next read.
Yeah, because a lot of people are so scared if I disappear, then I'm not gonna be able to come back.
Yeah.
Like, Sade has shown that she can come back whenever she wants, but other people might not have the confidence level that they could,
Mhm.
because she has her brand identity, everybody knows from the '80s who she is, that she has that kind of she lived in a world where she got to be like an icon. She's like one of these one name people, like the
Mhm.
Sade. So so she got into that zone, so she has a benefit, but other people in this modern world, like, "Well, I don't have that. I don't have that
Mhm.
kinda iconic status like the Madonna, the Prince,
Right.
the Sade." Like, they don't have that icon, like, no if they show up again, everybody's gonna pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's something there too to we're talking about the way that we kind of like see on social media people almost overexposing themselves. That also means that people are showing up on the scene often earlier in their career and at a lower level of skill than a lot of the people that they're in competition with or trying to break in next to. So I think we do see that sometimes in publishing too, right? I was 19 when I published my first book, you'll see on like a blog post or something. And then they go on to write 8 more books, but none of them are gonna be the smash hit or award-winning books that you might see from an author who, at age 35, published their debut novel they've been working on for 10 years. It's gonna just
Yeah.
look and feel different.
Yeah, it's kinda like, you gotta put the 10,000 out. I mean, you gotta build the craft,
Right.
and the whether or not today, like, there are people like, I don't wanna be super critical, but there's people who are producers and
Mhm.
DJs, and there are people who are actual musicians and play an instrument.
Mhm.
And so we have a world of a lot of like stars that don't have the technical capability of like a Stevie Wonder or a
Mhm.
Curtis Mayfield or a Sly Stone. They
Yeah.
just don't have it. They have a lot of people helping them. They have producers, they have multiple producers, but they're not at the proficiency level on their instrument that was in the past. And people have
Mm.
accepted it that that person, whether more of a star
Yeah.
or of a influencer type of star or just a media kind of notion, than actually being like competent or expertise like a Jimmy Page or Pete Townsend.
Mm.
Like they were kind of known, like, well, these guys are like, like the Beatles.
Right.
Lennon and McCartney, like the epitome of like the pop rock star writers. They're writers and they can
Yeah.
play instruments. So they can craft true singer-songwriter stories. We see a
Yeah.
lot of people today, it's like, well, did they really write that?
Right.
Did they actually play that?
Mhm.
Doesn't look like they're playing anything.
Right. Right. Do they have the sheet music for this that they
Yeah,
can actually use?
yeah,
Or is it somebody else's story that their face is attached to? Charisma can take you a really long way. That's also its own kind of skill to some degree to be able to show up with that star quality. And people develop that skill too. But I think you're right that there's a difference in terms of what is on a mass scale valued, which is not to say anything about, I think, smaller communities where there is a lot of value put into what is the skill, what is the expertise. I want to see someone who is really a master in their craft. And like that is the priority.
yeah, like a beat poet, like you show up in a coffee house and they're actually like doing like really
Yeah.
amazing poetry. And then you could have somebody that's actually, somebody that's like they're good, they're an actor, and
Yeah.
they could read that poetry better than the writer.
Yeah.
And so today's world is like I would rather they kind of will put the actor there that can convey it better and get more people to buy it than the actual maybe
Mm,
having the actual writer do it. Where
yeah.
we like in the I was a child of the '70s, the age of the singer-songwriter is like, yeah, the person who wrote the song is the guy playing the song. That doesn't
Mhm.
seem
Yeah.
to count as much anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting what you said about poetry too. So many years ago now, when I was a student at UCLA, I would attend poetry slams, which was amazing. So much fun, energy. Those slams were the called the Word on Wednesday. I don't know if they're still happening. I hope they are. And it was really amazing to get to see a setting where all of these students, undergrads, graduate students, sometimes faculty and staff members would come to these as well. People from really different walks of life. Some of them were like 18, and some of them
Mhm.
were like in their 40s, 50s on. And people would show up with these really raw pieces, and many of us didn't know each other. It was a pretty new crowd almost every week. There was a core group, and then people would filter in and out. So sometimes you're just showing up, you don't know, you're just, listening, gonna check
Yeah,
out some
yeah.
poetry, it'll be fun. And some random person shows up and reads the most like touching, gut-wrenching thing you've ever heard in your life. And it's like, who are you? Where have
Yeah,
you
yeah.
been?
Yeah, where'd they
And
come
so I
from?
think there's a lot of value too. And this I think is undervalued in the modern world of putting yourself in the way of potential new good art outside of social media, just in the real world. Where is it
Yeah, showing
happening?
up at
You
the
put
coffee
yourself
yeah,
there.
this old idea of, like, having a CBGBs, having a
Mm,
coffee shop. The CBGB scene was the scene where, like, Talking Heads, the
mhm,
Ramones, Blondie, Television, these were all, like, really super innovative bands, were all coming out of this small scene in New York, and they weren't the same. All of them were different,
yeah,
and it was generating this variation of, like, it's not sameness. Blondie's not the same as Talking Heads, and the Ramones not the same as that. They're all different. They're all coming from a different space. They were all trying to be the same genre, and that's what you get like in the coffee shop type of poet. They get people coming from like out of nowhere, kind of like how Dylan showed
mhm,
up back in the old ten. When he showed up in the story. If you watch the movie, like he showed up in these
mm,
spaces with all these folkies.
mm,
And he at that point, he was kind of mimicking Oliver Guthrie and Woody Guthrie. He was trying to find his voice. He's kind of mimicking whatever he's heard. and
Yeah.
it was multiple kind of styles he was hearing. He hadn't really found his own style, but he was going through it in these spaces where people were performing. And then
Mhm.
eventually, like, out of that, he found his own voice,
Yeah.
which was it wasn't Arlo Guthrie, it wasn't Woody, it was his own style. It was like that nasal kind of characterization, and nobody had heard that before, and nobody had done that before.
Mm.
And that's what you get when you actually are in those physical spaces. They start to evolve, you start to get confident, say, "Hey, I can actually spin part of me into this."
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and when you see someone who's just a member of your community showing up and trying out, "Hey, here's my weird art, check it out." It emboldens something inside of you too. Our brains, particularly our anxiety responses, really like the predictability factor. We hate putting ourselves in new situations a lot of the time because we don't know what's going to happen and our anxiety wants to keep us alive. If we witness somebody doing something, though, we have these amazing mirror neurons where I actually get to take a little bit of that experience and internalize it. So I see someone doing amazing slam poetry and they're just another student. That emboldens me. And the next week, right, I might show up with my own poem and say, I can do that because that person did it and it was fine. And it was
Yeah,
actually maybe great.
like the
How
old
cool is
talent
that?
show. Yeah, the talent
Yeah.
shows in the '70s where people would just show up at these clubs and they'd allow people, they used to have this thing at, in Harlem at the real famous place, Apollo. The
Mm,
Apollo used to have all these black acts, and they would just go out and try it. And they
mm,
get out
mhm.
there and they just had these vocal groups, these funk groups. They just would get out there and it was kind of like a talent show, kind of like America's Got Talent. But these spaces of allowing people to get out there
Yeah.
and just because James Brown was there, you know, then maybe I want to try to say, well, I can do that. Like, James
Mhm.
is amazing. Like, but there were kids that said, hey, I'll go and try. And
Right.
and they did. And I think when you give space for people to feel like the permission structure,
Mhm. Yeah, like,
to
just go make some art. See
yeah,
what
create your
happens.
own. Yeah, it was like a happening. Back in the day, you had these happenings, like Zappa
Mm,
back in San Francisco and like the Grateful Dead scene.
mhm.
People would just the Dead would have these big things that go for like 5, 6 hours, where they
Mm,
weren't the only band there. They
yeah.
would let other hippies go out there that weren't as big as them, and there was all these artists that were just allowed to play in these big happenings, you know? And they were able to that's where we got such a big revolution of all that music in the '70s and '60s, 'cause they had this mindset, like, why not let people try
Mhm.
things? Like,
Yeah. Oh, and how much more life affirming and creativity affirming it is to be able to make art in the presence of other people who are also doing it. I think that's another reason social media is so double edged, right? Because we're now seeing all these people who might not even have known where the stage was before, who can make their own little video and say, here's my song on guitar. What do you think? And they are
Mm,
just getting up and making art. And they're still alone in their bedroom. And they might be getting comments and likes and stuff like that, but there's such a different energy when you put yourself in that space and you get to meet other people who care about the things that
yeah,
you care about.
it's the collaboration that's missing on the net until
Yeah,
the net becomes a place where, like, if I see that guy doing it, like, "Hey, I'd like to play bass with you."
right.
Where in the club, like, you could have 2 groups get together and say, "Hey," and this is what used to happen is, like, some guys say, "Hey, no, that drummer's better than our drummer," or "That bass
Mm,
player, let's go have him come sit with us." And then
yeah.
people would make personnel changes because they would see, and then it was big there's a big story with, like, the Beatles and the Who all had these
Mm,
personnel changes. Led Zepp because they were playing on these stages and different people would say, "No, that guy, this guy actually fits better."
mhm.
So they would make these choices because they're in these spaces and people could hear it and see and say, "Hey, no, this works better." You can't do that in your bedroom.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we can't I mean, I think people sometimes assume that art is this incredibly solo endeavor. Again, I come from the world of writing a lot more. And so oftentimes, sure, you are in your room writing your story by yourself. But also, if you don't have people around you that are also creating, that are able to read what you're doing or that you can talk to, it just isn't the same.
Yeah, it's that scene, like, if you're a writer, you absorb the scene around you.
Yeah.
If you go back, the famous writers that were kind of traveling, like the Jack Kerouac, the fact that
Mhm.
they traveled, the fact that they went to these scenes, they would kind of beatnik scene, with going to the little jazz club scene or the
Right.
coffee or this little, flower scene. You be in a scene with the like-minded poet with the poets. There could be actors there. There could be painters there. So your influence, like you think about like Andy Warhol hanging
Mm.
out with Lou Reed in the Velvet
Yeah.
Underground. They used to have these things called happenings. Like, and they had this thing
Mhm.
where Andy had actors, painters, Lou Reed had his band, the Velvet Underground. They were models, and they were all in the same space to kind of vibe, and they were influencing each other. Lou Reed was getting
Yeah.
stories from the paintings, from the actors, from the people in the room, and Warhol is picking up vibes from Lou and the
Yeah.
other. So they're all kind of cross pollinating, and they're all kind of intertwining different genre, different types of disciplines, all affecting each other.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful, and it's the one thing that I wish if I could, like, beam this out at people. It really is, like, finding your creative community is so, so essential, not only on, like, a it makes it more fun level, but on a how does this feel sustainable level. Like,
Yeah.
the all of the research tells us that the more we play, and especially the more we play with other people, the more we get out of every single creative endeavor and the easier it is to keep going.
You're more likely not to burn out if you get into a scene. If you like, I've seen like
Right.
I'm an electronic musician, and I've gotten into these collectives,
Mm,
and it were
mhm.
basically like multiple bands, and we'd all hit the same club in New York.
Yeah.
And then we'd be watching each other and say, "Hey, I want to collaborate with you. I want to go work." So we would create additional projects and create different opportunities. And instead of all going to the club individually, we'd be able to take over a club for a couple of days and be able to have a collective that would
Mm,
come and be in that club. And then from there, there were people who were artists and say, "Hey, I can pitch an album cover, or I can pitch a
yeah,
design for a T-shirt." So then you're talking to artists, and then there could be guys there that are doing film students. It's like, "I could help you with a video."
right,
So it's just
right,
that being in that scene is just a cross pollination. And there could be a writer in there is getting ideas for their book by being
yes,
in the scene.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, you don't have to find a niche that sells well and stick to it and never talk to anybody else ever again. I think so much of the advice about turning your creative work into a business really misses the human element of why we do it in the first place.
Yeah, a lot of it is a musician. I mean, how many times we will go and play and not get paid?
Yeah.
Just to be able to be in that have that experience of playing with somebody. And maybe we get paid late, but we don't care. It's like if I get an opportunity to play with this guy, play with that guy, work it out. It's the idea of actually being able to interact with that person
Mm,
is
mhm.
more important than the actual financials. Like with today, which becomes so financial, it's like it's more important to know
Yeah.
what the contract is instead of knowing that I actually get an opportunity to be with this person, kind of vibe off of them.
Mm,
Where vibe was more important in the past. And it's
yeah,
now it's kinda like you don't wanna get ripped off, and I understand the business aspect,
sure.
but the vibe aspect is super important to the actual creation process.
Yeah. Yeah, it's how you refill your cup. If you're only ever a business person, where are you getting the chance to stretch your boundaries on a creative level? It's a big
And we have
question.
to you have to balance it, like, you don't wanna get ripped by, like, a management company that has you, like,
No.
vibing and create all this content, and then you never get paid. And that's
Yeah,
kind of
you
like
gotta make a living.
it's like the lessons from the past is like Hendrix used to sign any contract that was in front of him.
Mm, mhm.
And it kinda screwed up his money. But,
Yeah,
he's Hendrix, he did what he wanted. But,
sure.
you sometimes it's like in arts, it's always that thing where there are people who will take advantage of an artist because the artist doesn't really care about business. They
Mhm.
care about art. And
Yeah,
so there are people around them that have to kinda protect them.
yeah.
Like the Beatles and Stones, they started to get management that would actually, protect them or protect their interest. And because the artist's mindset and most of the time is like, well, I want to be in the creative space. I don't want to be
Mhm.
thinking about the widgets and the balance sheet.
Right.
That's not my thing. But now everybody says, well, I want to be able to do the balance sheet and do the art. Well, it's kind of
Yeah,
hard.
it is hard. Yeah, it's not impossible, and the world absolutely can be your oyster, and, um, again, yeah, with burnout in particular, it's so easy to just push, 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 push towards what we think we're supposed to do, and leave behind the journey that we actually wanted to go on.
Yeah, it's like the people, get so disincentivized because of social media. I worry about the young people,
Yeah,
like how many people stopped
right.
where if they kept on going, they could really be really they're bringing something to the world that needs to be heard, but they're stopping like after 7 episodes like a podcaster, right? If you're
Yeah.
musicians, like, they could be super brilliant and really putting something that needs to be heard, but because they can't get through the mechanism, they can't get through the
Mhm.
bureaucracy, it's getting left behind, and so that we're not seeing as much innovation as I would dare say, like, in the '60s and '70s, you saw
Mhm.
massive innovation
Mhm.
in terms of sound and structure. I mean, just look at The Work.
Yeah.
It's like there's a fusion of multiple genres. It's very inventive, very, long lasting. And maybe I'm nostalgic, but if you actually check it, check a top 20 list from 1974,
Mm,
1969 or 68, and then check our list today. How
right.
much of the stuff today is actually going to stand up to what that stuff is?
Right. Yeah, and I think the idea of that discouragement is also so real because there absolutely are people who are creating things that we haven't seen before, but are they getting heard? Are they
Yeah.
making it through all of the different cogs that they have to wiggle through to get up to the top? It's so hard.
Yeah, the cogs used to be Frank Zappa used to say this, like, he said, back in the day, that the business guys in music would say, "Well, I don't understand it, but maybe that would work." He
Mm,
said Zappa went and said something like what to the effect of, "The people they today that think they're so smart that they're just gatekeeping everything and not having that point of view, not
yeah.
allowing the stuff to go through because they think they know."
Mhm.
Where so they're being very limiting. Though there is an underground where this stuff exists, but it's not
Right.
being allowed to propagate, like, you're not getting a band like the Mothers of Invention
Mm,
being allowed to be on radio, on record for like 5, 6 years
right.
on a
Right,
big
because 'cause they're
label.
not.
Like,
It's true.
you're getting bands that could be on small labels, but they're not cutting through. They're not going on MTV. They're not getting in rotation. They're not getting pushed. And so, like, the same thing with, like, how many people are putting their book on Amazon
Mhm.
and how many are getting through to a big publisher and actually getting to be a household name like a Stephen King.
Right. Yeah, it's a huge difference. Yeah, and I think too, there's a lot to be kind of said in there about the idea that when you get to the top, your job no longer is just the thing that you wanted to do. But so many right top musicians nowadays are musicians and like brand ambassadors,
Yeah,
musicians and actors, musicians and influencers. There's this expectation that they're using something that's might maybe not even their music, but their personality or their
their
face to
personality is
sell
the thing.
product.
Yeah, yeah, but their personality is the thing.
Yeah.
Like they're selling what I would call their stage self.
Mhm.
It's like their stage self is the iconic thing. Like, they could be in movies, they can be in video games, they could be there. They're all over the place. But it's like, are they actually as impactful as like a Dylan or a Springsteen,
Mhm.
writing
Mhm.
like Born to Run or writing like, like the things that Dylan did with like a Rolling Stone. Are they actually writing something that's like historically important? Or are they writing jingles that
Yeah.
can be used by a pharmaceutical company to sell a drug?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, are they actually writing something that actually tells you a story, or is it
Mm,
just gonna be used for top line, like in
right.
somebody's ad on Madison Avenue?
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. It's tough and I think it can be discouraging when you think about, okay, what is my trajectory as a creative? Do I even want to be a superstar? Is that even a position that exists now in the way that it used to, where your art takes you to the top? I don't
I
know.
think
And
I think
what's
you have
coming
to
next? This bubble's gonna
I think
burst at some point.
Well, I think what's gonna happen is people are gonna want vulnerability and
Yeah.
authenticity, and then after they see enough, um, AI created pop stars,
Yeah.
like, we're gonna deal with it, like, what's gonna come in the next 5 years are these AI generated kind of
Totally.
not real pop stars, like, they're just, like, created from machines.
Yeah.
They're gonna get big,
Mhm.
and it's gonna be a thing, but I think there's gonna be a kind of a rebellion against it, and it's gonna go back to, like, singer-songwriters and
Mm.
people so there usually is this wave, and,
Yeah.
the evidence is kinda like with Kurt Cobain,
Mm.
because you had this, like, the grunge movement was a response to, like, the hair band kinda
Right.
overproduced corporate bands of, like, the MTV age, that they wanted something that was more authentic, more real, and so you had
Mm.
these, like, grunge bands, like Nirvana and Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, and, Smashing Pumpkins, they started to say, "Hey, the song means something. The words mean something. The image of my hair, my lipstick, and my MTV
Yeah.
video doesn't mean as much as what I actually say in the song." And I
Right.
think this comes in waves, and I think there's gonna be a wave coming after the AI star wave.
I think you're right. Yeah, and I love that framing that somebody out there who's trying to be vulnerable, who's trying to make beautiful art and be authentic with it and push back against inauthenticity might rather than just not being able to get any traction, they might just be at the forefront of a movement that's still trying to take off.
Yeah, I think that eventually my daughter's a 25 something, and she's always showing me all these artists that are still, like, singer-songwriters that are kinda in the
Mm,
underground, and
yeah,
I get very inspired, like, that she finds them,
yeah,
and a lot of her friends find them. It's
yeah,
just like the corporate world isn't finding them, but the people are finding themselves.
right.
So I see these young groups, of the groups like, women that she's with, they're finding all these artists, and I'm like,
Yes.
"Wow, they're finding so they exist. They're just not breaking through." So I just feel that's the weight of that is gonna keep on kind of building, and I think we're gonna
Yeah,
get a breakthrough person to come from the underground, it's gonna blow up.
yeah, yeah, I look forward to it.
Well, I think that's why I love, like, art because I'm always looking for, like, the independent film, the
Yes.
independent book, like, the thing that's not in the top 10, top 20. I'm always looking at the bottom 500.
Yeah, right, I always wanna be shown something I haven't seen before, which is
Yeah,
so
'cause, like,
difficult, but once you find
everybody
it, it's
wants
the
to
most
yeah, they
amazing
just
thing.
want yeah, the next Star Wars is like, okay, what we how many times I'm a kid, I like science fiction, and, like, I don't need to see another like, I how many times have I seen that? It's like,
Yeah.
you can blow up the Death Star again in a different way.
Mhm. Yep.
It's like, can't we come up with something new? Like
Right.
like can't we have a new idea, like a 2001, like a Stanley Kubrick, like, space movie that's,
Yeah.
like, not about this, but about, like, artificial intelligence?
Uh-huh.
Like, it's kinda like a HAL 9000 with, like, a prelude. Like like you can actually say things in science fiction.
Yeah.
And there are science fiction authors, like, like the Time Quartet,
Mm.
there's cool stuff you can get into in science fiction. It doesn't have to always be the king author thing done over and over and over again, or
Right. Yeah, the science
Kurosawa
fiction fantasy
Kurosawa
space.
done over and over again.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I mean, I've definitely loved a lot of works recently that really grapple with colonialism, but in space or in a fantasy world or in a historical fantasy where you can say something new about an old story that humans keep telling over and over again, but you're able to do so outside of that same hyper traditional format. The Spirit Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez is one that comes to mind. That's so weird and odd and strange and
They should make a
beautiful.
movie of that. That's the kind of
They
things I'm
should.
like, with
Yeah, that'd be
those
incredible.
these things out of like Gene Roddenberry, and Rod Serling. They
Mm,
used to use science fiction to make political statements within the science fiction.
exactly.
And science fiction has always done that. You've always seen it, Harlan Ellison, Ben Bovin, like all these great Isaac
Mm,
Asimov. They always had these like statements
yeah,
that they could live in these science fiction books
yep.
because they weren't directly, getting to it. But that area in fantasy and science fiction can always do that. And if people would kind of look at these ideas and say, "Hey, we could bring this instead of bringing the same story over and over."
Right. Do we need, like, Cinderella the 5th time?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know. I
when
think
we
maybe I've
see
seen
some
it.
yeah, I like the old, line animation, not the CGI.
Right.
There's something about, like, my daughter's an artist, like, I like looking at actual human l animation because there's
Mhm.
something about, like, Fantasia or
Yeah.
looking at, like, the old, Popeye cartoons or Felix the
It's
Cat
so
cartoons or Warner
expressive.
Bros. So expressive, so much work done to give
Yes.
up, and there's nothing like, really great, got Japanese automation where, you see the stuff coming from Japan in terms of, like, what you can do, like, Spirited Away.
Yeah.
Like, you can be very powerful with, like,
Mhm.
human drawn animation,
Yeah.
and, there's a lot of people who feel like the AI you gotta be careful because, like, the hand-drawn animation is so emotional and can convey a lot of levels that I
Mhm.
don't know, if we're at the level where the art people actually know how to use the AI to do the same thing.
Right. And if it ever can, it's because it's copying.
Yeah, it's just cloning something that existed. It's like there's something about human capability, frame to frame, note to note, word to word, when a writer actually does it and it's their voice.
Yes.
It's their human experience that's cutting through.
Yeah.
And that is a uniquely human thing and no machine to me, is that we have a sentient machine that has dreams and
Uh-huh.
has their own experience and has been downtrodden and had to fight
Right.
and had to struggle and
Yeah, it's
actually
a
have a
different
voice.
story.
Yeah, we're not dating. We don't have a data yet.
Right.
But I wanna thank you for being on the show because we kinda got into a lot of cool things, but,
Yes.
fighting burnout, I think is a universal theme that a lot of artists are struggle with, and I hope they can check you out and, through your website, like, if people
Mhm.
click on your website, that's how they can connect with you and talk to you.
Yes, yeah, so my website is down there, I'm hoping to post some blogs very soon this summer, diving into some of these topics. If you wanna work with me as a client and you're located in California, I'm able to do telehealth sessions, so that is an option for the audience. Or if you just wanna reach out and connect, in a creative to creative way, totally open to that.
That's awesome. I wanna let people know that, we've been live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. That URL, Nicole
Mhm.
Penrod, MFT.com, is fully clickable. So I'm not gonna say the whole thing, but you'll be able to click through it in the podcast description on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We will be on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and Amazon by tomorrow, and
Love
we'll
it.
give a landing page so the whole community out there can pick whatever platform they want, and that will be sent to you through the mechanisms we have for you. But I want to thank you for being on the show tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. What a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Have a great day or
You
night.
too. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.